Hello, good morning. Thank you, Jimmy. My name is Daniel Connolly, and I'm here to talk about the Genesis and Terranode. To talk about Bitcoin infrastructure. Infrastructure is the term that I use for everything beneath the application layer. So the Bitcoin specification, the Bitcoin node, the Bitcoin protocols that make the whole Bitcoin work, and on top of which developers can build and businesses can build applications. We've been working on this infrastructure now for several years. It's been a long road. We started by increasing the capacity from the BTC 4 transactions per second now up to 1,000 transactions per second. We did that to immediately enable extensive use of the chain. And then we started focusing on Genesis, on reverting the protocol back to the original, to how it was supposed to be. We've traveled that road, and now we are here. Genesis went live on the 4th of February, as Jimmy mentioned earlier, 1 year, 1 month, 1 day after the first Bitcoin block. The thing about Genesis, there's lots in Genesis. It's a huge change. And there's lots I could talk about. This, in fact, is a list of all the technical changes that are included in there, but I'm not really going to go through those one by one. What I do want to the point about it is that it brings back the original Bitcoin. It brings back the original specification. It brings back the original language. It brings back the original capabilities of Bitcoin. And it brings them back, and it sets them in stone. We are now not making any more changes to the Bitcoin infrastructure, the Bitcoin specification. Let me see, next one. So, my favorite part of Genesis is unleashing transactions. Transactions, by removing the limits, by enabling large transactions, by restoring the operations in the scripting language, what we've enabled is we've enabled complex transactions. I think it's very well expressed by this tweet that came out a couple of days ago. I really loved it. It may be a bit technical, but I'm going to go through it very briefly. The pay-to-public key hash is the simplest transaction type. It involves the transfer of Bitcoin from one transaction to the next. It's incredibly simple, right? And what he's saying here is that, but it's also used everywhere. On many blockchains, it is the dominant transaction type. And what he's saying here is that type of transaction, which is it's just the simplest use case you can make. It's the beginning, right? It's the simplest program you can write on Bitcoin. This is a P2PKH transaction. It may look complex, but it's actually incredibly simple. There are only 4 operations there, 3 data values. It just transfers Bitcoin from one, you could say from one address to another address, right? But imagine that's just 4 operations. It's 4 commands in a language. Imagine if we had tens of thousands of operations. If we enabled transactions to contain complete programs, okay? And that's what Genesis does. It unleashes transactions. It unleashes the capabilities to write complex transactions, smart contracts, escrow, puzzles, all sorts of basic building blocks that can then be built up into full business applications. And we're starting to see them, right? They are starting to appear on the testnet and on the mainnet. This is one from a couple of days ago. It is incredibly complicated. I'm not going to go through it. It is actually written in a higher level language, which is the subject of a presentation later this afternoon. It's written in script, and I believe it restricts the transaction from being spent until today. But I'm sure you'll hear more about it in the presentation this afternoon. That was my favorite part of Genesis, unleashing transactions, enabling developers to build on top of Bitcoin. This slide is the developers building, not Bitcoin building. Bitcoin is now stable, it is fixed, and I'm looking forward to seeing the huge amount of applications that I believe will be built on top of Bitcoin SV. That's Genesis. Genesis is crucial. It provides a stable foundation upon which we can further grow. Now that the infrastructure team in nChain has completed Genesis, what are we going to do next? The next stage for us is Terranode. Terranode is a new way of, again, it's infrastructure level. It's a new piece of software to handle massive transaction volumes, to handle massive use of the blockchain, an enterprise-ready solution to integrate closely with enterprise systems. And what have we done? We've redesigned from the beginning. We've gone back to the first bits. We've identified the users of the blockchain, the people who would be interested in running the system, what their needs are. There are differences between the different types of users. How these needs impact the architecture that we have designed. We're using big data paradigms with distributed computing power, scaling horizontally to handle massive transaction volumes. One of the first things that we want to start changing is the Bitcoin P2P network. And the first thing we're going to change is the name, okay? It's not a P2P network at all, right? P2P network usually refers to users talking to each other, users exchanging transactions between each other. That's not what this does at all. It is the Bitcoin server network, right? The first thing we're going to do is change the name. Now, it is a change, but it's not a change to Bitcoin, all right? It's a change to how the systems that implement Bitcoin, how they communicate with each other, okay? And we need to make it more efficient to enable the huge transaction volumes that we expect to see. I do have a whole list of technical changes that we want to make. I'm going to skip through a lot of them, but I do want to talk about this one a bit. This is one of the biggest ones. You can imagine that when we have really large transactions, for example, and we are seeing this already on the scaling test network, that the communication channels get a bit clogged up, right? You have this massive transaction that you're trying to send from one system to the other, and you have another more important message that comes at the end of it, and you have to wait for that one to finish. And this is why we need to do something which is a standard engineering practice, is to separate out the control from the data, all right? So that the control messages can travel quickly and not be held up by the data messages in the back. It also goes into a deeper topic of why does the Node software serve blocks from 2010, right? The Node software is there to process transactions. It's not there to deliver 10-year-old data, okay? So as well as separating out control and data, we can also separate out many of the processing functions for the node. And that's getting technical. 32-bit limits, they need to go as well. These are some other things that I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to skip over because they're incredibly technical. Multi-IP, this is part of being ready for Terranode, where we have a system that scales horizontally. These are network protocol changes that are coming. They will be backwardly compatible. They will be on Bitcoin SV node, but they're designed for Terranode. How are we going to approach Terranode? We're going to keep improving Bitcoin SV node. There is still a lot of quick wins we can make there to increase transaction capacity. This is our focus now, increasing transaction capacity. In the meantime, we're going to be refactoring it to migrate parts, to reuse parts of Bitcoin SV node in Terranode. to take advantage of the huge amount of code that we already have, the huge amount of expertise amongst our developers with that code, to produce this new system, which will power the Bitcoin SV in the future. Our first target is actually to extract the communication part, the Bitcoin server network, off into separate systems to reduce the load on the main node so that it can process more and more transactions, so that it can fetch transactions from multiple places and insert them into a block. This is my summary of where we're going with Terranode. We expect to release at least prototypes later this year. Thank you all very much for listening to it, and I hope you enjoy the conference.
Hi, I'm Hannah Jackson here for Coingeek.com, and I'm here with Daniel Connolly from nChain. So, first of all, tell me all about Genesis Upgrade and why that is so important for the entire Bitcoin SV community and ecosystem.
The Genesis upgrade is so important because it sets the protocol in stone and it sets it back to the way it used to be. We now have a stable system that will not be changed anymore, that people can build on with assurance that their systems will continue to work in the future.
What do you think the most exciting thing to come out of that is?
I'm really looking forward to complex transactions. I'm looking forward to seeing what business use is made from them, how people build transactions using the capabilities of Genesis.
So tell me a little bit more about Terranode.
Terranode is our next generation solution. It's an enterprise-ready piece of software, enterprise quality. We're working on it. We expect to release initial versions this year, and it'll be the future for processing huge amounts of transactions.
Why would Terranode and the Genesis upgrade entice bigger enterprises to come and work there?
Because now we have a stable system that will stay stable and the same, and it will enable huge volumes of transactions, cheap transactions, that can allow enterprises to take full advantage of the blockchain.
Great!